Christmas goblins, mistletoe, the layer upon layer upon layer of myths, the myths of the origins of the Christmas tree, Santa Claus, your favorite Christmas carols, Christmas foods, fruitcake, Mutant Saints, yes, all this and more in this week's fun and fantastic episode about the Christian roots of Christmas traditions with my guest, Dr. Michael P. Foley, author of Drinking with the Saints, fantastic guy with awesome stories. He does some deep dives into some of the origins of our favorite Christmas traditions and explains where they come from and how we as Catholic Christians can celebrate these different traditions and elements of Christmas, incorporate those into our faith lives, for our families, for our kids, how we can establish these traditions in our own rights and use these and where they all came from. It's a fantastic conversation. I think you'll love it. You'll learn new things. You'll laugh. You'll be amazed and astounded and want to share this with all your friends. I hope. It was a great conversation and just in time for you to go to so-and-so's house, grandma, Aunt Thelma's house, I don't know, Uncle Bob, and tell them some really cool facts about Christmas traditions that you have just learned on this show. It's the perfect time. So please watch, please enjoy, please subscribe to this channel, please leave some comments below, hit the bell, do all those fun things, and enjoy this episode with Dr. Michael Foley on the Christian roots of Christmas traditions. Please enjoy. Hey friends, thanks for being here. Welcome back to the show. Thanks for listening. Thank you for watching. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing right now, take a little, I don't know if you can, but maybe pour a little eggnog for yourself with the fire down low. Maybe gather up the garland and the mistletoe, and I don't know what else you want to do. Get some chestnuts roasting maybe there. If you have an accessible open fire, make sure you're well within the limits of the city bylaws or whatnot. Don't start anything on fire, please. If you're driving, don't do any of those things. Okay, just listen. I say these things because I'm joined this week on the show by Dr. Michael P. Foley, and we're talking about the Christian roots of Christmas traditions. It'll be a great time. Dr. Foley is a professor of patristics in the Great Texts program at Baylor University, and professor of theology at the Aquinas Institute. He's written over 400 articles, 14 books, including, of course, the Drinking with the Saints series book, and Drinking with Saint Nick, and Drinking with Your Patron Saints, and The Politically Incorrect Guide to Christianity. That's fantastic. Some seriously fantastic books, Dr. Foley, I gotta say. Mike and his wife live in their adopted hometown of Waco, Texas, with their 6 children, 12 chickens, 2 turtles, 1 dog, 12,000 bees, and a partridge in a pear tree, if I'm not mistaken at this point. Dr. Foley, thanks for being here. Welcome to the show, and hello.
Hello, and thank you so much for having me.
I'm very excited to have you, I gotta say. Least of all because I love a good guest from Baylor and a good guest from Waco. We've had quite a few of your kin, your colleagues on this show, and I always have to ask when at the outset. I asked this of your colleague, Dr. Francis Beckwith, when I had him on the show way back when. I said to him, I said, Dr. Beckwith, kind of tell me, do you know Chip and Joanna? Because that's the question that, of course, I need to know. I love these guys. I love Fixer Upper. I love the cottage industry they have going there. Thinking, of course, no, he doesn't know them. It's actually, my wife works with Joanna on the farmers market board of directors, and they bought a house down the street from us actually recently. I said, really? It is a small town after all. So, but do you know the Gaineses, Dr.
The closest connection that I have is that we had a neighbor on the street who was Joanna's yoga instructor. And she had to get up at 4:30 in the morning to direct JoJo in yoga before all of the business hours, came. Yeah. That's the closest connection that I've had, unfortunately.
So at this point, Francis and Dr. Beckwith is in the lead for the closest connection.
He's in the lead. In so many things, he's in the lead.
That's wonderful. So we're talking about your fantastic new book, Why We Kiss Under the Mistletoe. Okay, now you've got some great books to follow up on, right? The Drinking with the Saints series, I gotta say, Dr. Foley, is legendary. I mean, everyone knows these books. Everybody, I can't tell you the number of priests I follow on Instagram who regularly all they post are angry memes about Vatican II, or pictures of their drinks they're drinking from your. I like the drinks they're drinking. I like those pictures when they post those. I could deal without the rest of the stuff there, but that's a fantastic stuff you've done with that. So kudos for that stuff. It's awesome. This falls in a similar vein. I think you've got a great way of writing with a bit of a tongue in cheek, with a bit of drawing on history and the tradition and these kinds of things. Why? Where does this idea come from? What do you think? Where do you? I can see two angles here, right? This isn't one of those angry Christmas books, right? You have those angry Christmas books that are like, here's why, get the pagans running for the hills. Here's why we are retaking Christmas, right? That's not your approach. Neither was it to reclaim alcohol for the saints with your other book. But what was the light bulb for this kind of thing? It's so interesting.
Well, you're absolutely right. It came from a place of joy. Like so many other children, I grew up just being in love with Christmas. And I recognized that it was the most special season of the year, especially with the symbolism. Like there's no other time in the American year that is so rife with symbols. But these symbols are not self-explanatory. Why do we kiss under the mistletoe? Why do we deck the halls with boughs of holly and not boxwood? Why the Christmas tree? So I always had questions growing up as a kid. And then doing, doctoral work in theology, I gained certain skills. And so when I had the time, I just wanted to dive deep and figure out the answer to these questions. And I'm really happy with what I found.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's very well done. A lot of fun, informative, and right deep. And I want to begin. I mean, there's a lot to go through here. We could go in for hours. You just buy the book and read it. That's probably the best solution. But let's begin with Christmas itself and the dating of Christmas, because this is again. And I don't want to do this. Well, the pagans are wrong kind of thing over and over again, right? But this is one of those myths you often hear. It's trotted out every Christmas time, right? December 25th. You Christians think you've got the right data, and you've just stolen this from some kind of pagan thing or something. And they're all kinds of different theories. So you begin there. Why December 25th? Why is this a day that we celebrate Christmas? And by the way, I have some eggnog. So if you can see me on camera sipping, I actually did pour some eggnog because why not? The kids are in bed. Dishes are done. We're sitting down for a chat. I'm going to have some eggnog while you regale us with Christmas tales. So why December 25th?
Okay. So one of the things I discovered is that there are myths about Christmas myths. And one of the myths that I grew up with was this idea that, we don't really know when Jesus was born. There's this Roman emperor. He instituted a feast of the unconquered sun god on December 25th, and the Christians just co-opted this feast. Now, it is true that Christians co-opt pagan customs, and we should have absolutely no shame in doing so. As Augustine says, you despoil the Egyptians. You take whatever is good and you make it your own. So that wouldn't be a problem. But here's the thing. When the Roman emperor instituted that feast in, I think it was the late 4th century, for 100 years earlier, Christians in Rome believed that the birthday of Jesus was December 25th. So this wasn't a pagan co-opting. They really believed it. And they might be right. We don't know if they're right, but they might be right. It depends on how you read the Gospel of Luke. When does Zechariah offer sacrifice in the temple? If he offered it in late September, which is totally plausible, then his son, John the Baptist, would be born in late June, and Jesus, who is 6 months younger than John, would be born in late December. It's possible. The bottom line is we just don't know.
I thought it was interesting to learn that Christmas got off to a slow start, right? I didn't, this is one of those, and you make a point of this in the book too, that this isn't the high feast for the liturgical year. This isn't the high feast of the church. That's Easter, of course, resurrection of Jesus. Christmas often plays this very important role, and often because of maybe the secular nature of Christmas these days, it crowds out Easter often on the calendar, even for people who go to church. This often seems like a bigger deal. But this wasn't always the case that it was even half of what it was to date, right? This was a much smaller thing with a slower start. And it sounds like maybe even some of the reformers didn't love Christmas or tried to repress this. I mean, that kind of surprises me.
Well, you're right. Christmas did get off to a slow start. Easter had a head start, and rightly so. It is the Paschal mystery. It is a mystery of our redemption. But then the more you think about it, the more you realize, gosh, there would be no redemption without the incarnation. And so over time, there was this deepening appreciation for the birth of the God-man. The first thing was the conception of the God-man. So the Feast of the Annunciation on March 25th was seen as a more important feast. But then, well, 9 months later, what happens? Jesus is born. Yeah, that's pretty good too. So over time, there was this deepening appreciation. One of the reasons why the Protestants did not like Christmas was, especially the Puritans. For the Puritans, you could not celebrate a feast that was not explicitly celebrated in the Bible. So even though Christmas is described in the Bible, it's not celebrated as a feast. And man, oh man, did they go after that feast with a vengeance. I mean, the stories about the Puritan attack on Christmas, it makes you rub your eyes in disbelief how much they hated Christmas. They were the Grinches par excellence.
So how did that then shape kind of Christmas as it extends, in that time? Because I picture like Little House on the Prairie, Christmas in the log cabin, kind of like we read these stories to the kids at bedtime and they seem delightful. But this is what the Puritans were trying to quash, it sounds like.
You're absolutely right. So by the 19th century, America has warmed up to Christmas. That has to do with two things. American poets in New York City who have invented the myth of Santa Claus. And on the other side of the pond, Charles Dickens, who sentimentalizes Christmas in a good way with Ebenezer Scrooge and so on. So the Puritans failed. Their Commonwealth was overthrown. The monarchy was restored in England. The Puritans in Boston were, thanks be to God, overwhelmed by the Irish. And so eventually Christmas had a reboot in the 19th century in America.
And has grown from there.
Yeah, and it's kind of grown in perhaps unhealthy ways, but, at least it got back on the map.
You mentioned the invention of Santa Claus by these poets, and that's such an interesting thing. There's so much wrapped up in there, and I know that even culturally, the idea of Santa Claus crosses different cultural borders. The idea of a gift giver at this kind of season comes from different places. We have, prior to informing myself about these traditions from your book, we had a children's book called Jingle Bells, which covers the different traditions around the world. And you're going through, these things from Sweden and from Italy and Russia, and you're kind of scratching your head, am I scaring the kids at bedtime, or is this like, is this cultural awareness important? Because some of these gift-giving characters at this time of the year are a little bit creepy, Dr. Foley.
Oh, extremely creepy. And one of the big surprises in researching the book was the dark side of Christmas. Witches, goblins, ghosts, elves, which were scary creatures before they were tamed to make toys for Santa. They haunted the winter and Christmas season. So when Charles Dickens chooses Christmas Eve to be the night in which Ebenezer Scrooge is visited by three ghosts, He's not inventing that out of whole cloth. He is drawing from a very long and scary tradition, but I actually think it's a valuable tradition.
And where does that come from? Where does the tradition of ghosts and ghouls haunting, I almost said Halloween, haunting Christmas, where does that come from?
Well, you mentioned Halloween. So in pre-Christian Europe, Halloween was not the one scary night. Halloween was the beginning of a long and extremely dark and scary season that would only end with the spring season the following year. The dark nights of winter were a time of food scarcity, bitter cold, long nights, and the reign of evil. This was, for example, the night of the wild hunt, where an evil witch would lead ghosts and damned demons across the night sky. And if you saw it, you could be taken up as well. This is where Johnny Cash's song Ghost Riders in the Sky comes from. So there's like this really long mythology about the evil of winter. And when Christianity came, of course, it was a game changer. The light pierces these nights of dread. But you can only appreciate the light against the darkness that it vanquishes. And so even in Christian cultures, the darkness was still there, and it was still a force to be reckoned with.
And so, I mean, you look at something like Christmas Carol, where these ghosts are coming back to visit Scrooge to have him change his life, right, is the idea. And this is a very Catholic story in a sense of these ghosts kind of coming from purgatory to at least his Marley, his colleague, coming to haunt him, to remind him to change his life, right? That's a very kind of last chance purgatorial kind of idea there. Is that the nature of these scary tales as the Christian story kind of takes over, that they're meant to remind people of that light and point people towards that light, or are they just to scare them out of their bad ways? Like, what do those stories do when the Christian message takes over those long winters?
A little of both. So there are some theological lessons. There are some practical lessons about being nice and not naughty. But a lot of them are rather practical. So, for example, there were fears about witches during Christmas. And one of the superstitions was that on Christmas Eve, make absolutely certain all of your brooms are put away in a closet. Because if you don't, a witch could fly down the chimney, grab the broom, and start flying around.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, I thought it was eminently practical. But you could see kind of the point of this. Tidy up. Kids, tidy up. Put the broom away, or the witches will visit you tonight. Like, there is a sort of thinly veiled moralism in all of this.
Have you tried that with your own kids?
Oh, well,
does it work?
I don't know how personal you want me to get tonight, but there is an old superstition that after the last day of Christmas, you have to put away all of the Christmas ornaments. And whatever ornament you leave out, by that number, the same number of goblins will visit you that night.
Oh, geez.
So we do the 12 days of Christmas. The Epiphany came and went. It was January 7th. They still hadn't put away all the Christmas ornaments. And so I actually made, forgive me, but I made a facsimile of a goblin.
Oh, no.
And I put it outside our front bay window. And I said, kids, the Christmas decorations haven't been put away. And they like, what? I said, come out to the front. And so just as they came out to the front, I flipped on the front light, the front light, and it just shone perfectly on this makeshift goblin I had made. And my poor 6-year-old daughter, Monica, climbed up me in fear. She was absolutely terrified. I didn't mean to have that much of an effect. I felt really bad in hindsight. But anyway, she was in speech therapy at the time. And, we're at Baylor University. It's a Baptist university. we're homeschooling Catholics. We're kind of weird. And so to make conversation, the speech therapist says, "Hey, Monica, did you enjoy Christmas?" And Monica said, "No." And the speech therapist said, "Why not?" And she replied, "Too many goblins."
Oh, no.
The speech therapist, of course, looked at her like, "This confirms all the worst fears I have about Catholics." Yeah, it was not a good tool of evangelization.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible. Hopefully there were no other kinds of therapy that she required later in life, Dr. Foley. I don't know.
Yeah, well, time will tell.
That's incredible. You talked too about these mutant saints. Like I thought maybe I have a pre-release copy of your book that I received for review, and I thought this must be a typo or something in this. And when I saw the first one, a mutant Saint Lucy, and I'm not okay. What does he mean by that? And I read on, and then next there's another mutant saint. Who are these? Who are these? Is Professor Xavier recruiting some saints to work on a superhero team or something around? What's going on?
It's so bizarre. Folklore is so bizarre. So you have great saints like Nicholas and Saint Martin and Saint Lucy, but then, God knows how they get mixed with these kind of pre-Christian fears. And St. Nicholas becomes Belschnickel, which is this like hairy St. Nicholas. And he's a baddie. Like, how on earth did that happen? And St. Lucy, who's this patron of light, becomes the head witch for the wild hunt that we were speaking of a moment ago. Needless to say, none of this was approved by the magisterium, but it's just like this bad cocktail. It just sort of marinated with these pre-Christian traditions, and the result was literally monstrous.
And these saints, I mean, I don't know that. These were intended to be cautionary tales to scare the kids to picking up their clothes and these kind of things? Was this they were serving a quasi-saintly purpose in their evil ways?
I don't think they started out with a saintly purpose, but then when they come about, they try to get incorporated back into the Christian narrative. So, like, one of the ironies is that over time, one of the spooky sidekicks of St. Nicholas is Belschnickel. But Belschnickel is a mutant St. Nicholas.
Oh my goodness.
But now he's in the service of St. Nicholas. It's just, well, frankly, it is as coherent as Marvel's multi-universe or whatever the heck they call it, right? They pretend it's coherent, but it's not. And the same can be said of our own Christian traditions.
Oh, so the mutants are on par with the quote unquote real mutants of the Marvel, whatever. Yeah, I'm with you, Dr. I don't the multi-universe thing. Sorry to the Marvel fans out there. I don't know. So Santa Claus himself is kind of a strange mutation of different kinds of things. There's often this pushback. Again, one of these kind of like the pushy Christian pushback is Saint Nicholas, Santa Claus is ours. Let's reclaim Santa Claus for the Christian cause. Try and rebaptize him and claim him back from the pagans who have stolen him, made him into a gift giving kind of secular figure that Coca-Cola likes to use, right? But there's kind of different angles to take on the origin of Santa Claus that we know today. So where are some of the places that are drawn from that eventually become Santa Claus? Where are these things? St. Nicholas is, I think, one of those things, but where do these things come in from?
St. Nicholas is a great saint. He was a real human being, and he truly was the champion of the little guy. He was the champion of the poor, the champion of children, the champion of those wrongly accused by the government. And he rightly earned a place in people's heart as the patron of the little guy. So it only makes sense that over time, legends about him would grow. And they really got quite fantastic in the Middle Ages. but it was nothing in comparison to his transmogrification in New York City in the early 1800s by a series of American authors. Basically, what they did was they took local Dutch customs about St. Nicholas. They took Norse elements about Thor and Woden from Norse mythology. They put all three things in a blender and they flipped on the switch. And that is our modern legend of Santa Claus.
So it's really quite modern, this origin. Like, 'cause Saint Nicholas, he was a real guy. He was a bishop. Is that part true? So there's a truth to the origin of the red outfit. Like that part is at least legit.
The red outfit is not legit. It's from Thor.
Oh, okay.
Thor, after whom our day Thursday is named, was the god of fire, and he was associated with chimneys. So his color was red. Nicholas died a confessor. He did not die a martyr. So his liturgical color would be white and not red.
So not even the red is legit. That's bored. So how do you put those things in a blender and end up with the Santa Claus that's so beloved today? Like, how does that happen? Because I feel like lots of people think that this has these deep roots, but it doesn't seem that. It seems pretty man-made and recent.
Indeed, there are a lot of changes. Saint Nicholas was a celibate Catholic bishop who lived in the sunny Mediterranean of Asia Minor. He didn't have Mrs. Claus as his wife. He didn't live in the North Pole. He didn't wear red and white. He didn't have elves working for him. So there's so much that is, needless to say, off the charts. But the one common thing is the giving of gifts to children and a spirit of generosity and goodwill towards all. And that's what I affirm. I know there are a lot of silly things about the modern Christmas, but the one common thread is that sense of goodwill.
But the chimney thing, because that doesn't make a lot of sense to anybody. Why a chimney? That's from Thor?
Yeah, that was Thor's thing. He would come down chimneys. But there is also a tradition about St. Nicholas that he saved 3 daughters of a poor man from prostitution by throwing bags of coins down their chimney to give them money for a dowry.
So there are these interesting connections that draw back and kind of draw you in, the generosity, the gift giving. I mean, that's really interesting. The reindeer?
So it was either Thor or Woden, after whom Wednesday is named. I can't remember which. I think it was Thor. So Thor, he had a chariot, and it was pulled by 2 celestial goats. And when the goats and their hooves trampled on the clouds, it made thunder. So Washington Irving and Clement Clark Moore took that, and for whatever reason, they substituted reindeer. And at first it was 2 reindeer, and then Clement Clark Moore made it 8 tiny reindeer. And then eventually in the 20th century, we added Rudolph.
And of course, his symbolism is...
Rudolph's symbolism?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's a fascinating story in and of itself.
Oh, are you serious?
I am. It was a copy editor in 1939, working for Montgomery Ward. He was actually a Jewish man, and he was told, make a Christmas poem that will be marketable. And so he, quote, drew from his painfully shy childhood to describe a reindeer neglected by others. And it became an instant hit. Gene Autry recorded it, became one of the best-selling Christmas songs of all time. There's good news and bad news about the composer. He made millions of dollars off this song. But in the 1940s, the tax rate of the federal government was 92% of your wealth. And so within 7 years, he was bankrupt and had to go back as a copywriter at Montgomery Ward. But the good news is this Jewish man eventually converted to Catholicism and died a Catholic.
I asked about Rudolph, and look, this is what I get from you. That's a fantastic story. Amazing. I thought Canada had a bad tax rate, but I guess, wow, we had nothing compared to, wow, that's astonishing. But amazing.
Thank you, Ronald Reagan. Don't want to get political, but thank you.
Oh, but an amazing end to the story, an amazing Catholic conversion. That's fantastic. So is there, I mean, this is, the interesting thing is, I guess if we're talking about the secularization of St. Nicholas and the transformation of can I say Thursday instead of Thursday, by the way? That'd be a lot more fun. Hey kids, it's Thursday today. Dad, are you?
That's right.
Yeah. Yes, I finally lost it, children. I'm thinking of the secularization of Santa Claus, though, right? And is there value, would you say, for Christians, for Catholics to embrace a secular Santa Claus, knowing that the roots are so confused? And I know folks who say, no way, no Santa Claus. Absolutely not. I'm not bringing Thor down my chimney. I listeners to this show might be a little more tame, a little more calm after a couple of cups of eggnog, maybe. Is there value in embracing that tradition? I mean, there's generosity behind that. There's a spirit of giving. There's charity. What do you think?
Well, I can only speak from my personal experience. Both my wife and I grew up believing in Santa Claus. And when we were told that Santa Claus didn't exist, it did not induce any existential crisis. But like many traditional Catholics, when we had children of our own, we thought, ooh, we should never lie to our children, because if we do, it may undermine their confidence about, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So we made it very clear that, Jesus Christ was the reason for the season. Santa Claus was a wonderful story. However, we didn't do a perfectly good job because we never fully explained to them the tooth fairy. And so when they lost a tooth, we just said, put a tooth under the pillow, and then they'd get a coin. So we only discovered a few years later, we have now several adult children. We only discovered a few years later that they grew up not believing in Santa Claus, but they did believe in the tooth fairy. You just can't win as a parent in this age. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, there are a lot of young Catholic families, a lot of convert Catholic families listening to this show thinking, yeah, parenting is hard. It is hard.
It's so hard. And just don't be hard on yourself. Believe in Santa Claus. Believe in the tooth fairy. Don't believe in it. You know what? Whatever decision you make, they will still end up on the psychologist's couch in their early 20s. And there's no way you're going to be able to avoid that. So just deal with it.
I can't stand lose teeth, so I told our kids, if you lose a tooth, a demon comes and they haven't lost any teeth yet. Our oldest is 7. He's got them all still. Just he's here holding them in right this whole time. No, I'm joking. We did face that same dilemma though with Santa Claus, right? And the problem, of course, being that the kids go to school and the other kids are. What? I don't want my kid to be the kid that tells that all those kids Santa's real. My wife and I had the conversation about, well, we can't lie to him, but he also can't go and tell all the other kids that Santa Claus isn't real. It's going to cause a whole scandal in the school. I find the funny thing about I'm a school teacher. I taught 6th grade for a long time, and that's my day job. And I thought it was so funny that these kids who are 10, 11, 12 that I see don't believe in Santa Claus, but Elf on the Shelf. Dr. Foley, this thing is real, and this thing moves around at night, and I couldn't believe it. They'd make fun of each other for believing in Santa Claus. Oh, Santa Claus, but my elf did this last night. Guys, like, wait a second. They don't believe in the unseen Santa Claus, but the elf that moves at night, that's real. That's the real deal. I think creepier actually.
I totally agree.
It's always watching. So these other gift givers, I mean, you must have some favorites. I have some going through your book and the book that I have with our kids we've read before there are some weird ones in there. And you list a whole bunch here in this book of different gift givers from around the world. And maybe I don't want to appear like we're too North American centric. I'm here in Canada, you're down there in the States, and we don't have the corner on Christmas traditions. And these weird ones might seem totally normal to somebody from that country. But what are your favorite of these strange gift giving? Maybe give us a couple of your the most outlandish that you enjoyed discovering when you were writing this book.
All right. So you mentioned the United States. I live in Texas, but I'm next door to Louisiana, which has a wonderful French-Canadian provenance because of the Cajuns. They've got this weird female gift giver named Tante Harry, and it's derived from an old French tradition. But instead of pulling up on reindeer, she pulls up on two red-eyed alligators.
Ah, mais oui.
That circle through the bayou and give gifts. I don't know how many little Cajun children still believe in this, but it's part of the lore. But I think my favorite is from Italy, Befana. Befana is a corruption of the word Epifania for Epiphany. She is supposed to give gifts to children on the feast of the Epiphany. And the story is that she was a magnificent housekeeper, and she was visited by the Magi, who were searching for the infant Jesus. And they were super impressed with what a tidy house she had and her hospitality. And so they invited her to join them to visit the Christ child. But because she was so obsessed with her housekeeping, she said, "Let me just tidy up and I'll catch up with you later." Well, she took too long tidying up the house. And then when she went out to find the Magi, she could not. And so she has spent the rest of time searching for the Christ child.
It's such a fascinating, and I've read a number of those picture books to our kids, and we have an Advent tradition my wife is working on this year where we're opening she wrapped a Christmas book or an Advent book for every day of Advent, and we're unwrapping that book every night. It's really it's tons of work on her part, a lot of fun for us to unwrap, and fun for me. I don't know what books come when, and one of a few of the books that we've had over the years come from that tradition, and it's a sad tragic story, right? It's really it's one of those, like, a better version of the Left Behind series. Maybe, right? You've missed out on this amazing event, and you get to spend your life kind of trying to figure out how you can get that back. It's a cautionary tale. It's sadly poetic. Yeah.
Well, so many of these myths are very thinly veiled morality tales. Yeah. So clearly, our wives, our mothers, they work so hard to make the Christmas season pleasant for the entire family, but it's easy for them to get obsessed and to be too much of the Martha and not enough of the Mary. And so the Befana story is a reminder, don't lose the meaning of the season, right? It's great that you keep a tidy house. We all appreciate it, but there's something greater.
Yeah, that's fantastic and terrifying. Let's do. I want to do Mistletoe at some point because it's the title of your book, and I want to know why. No one will kiss me under the mistletoe, Dr. Foley, but I don't know what's going on there. I maybe need to brush my teeth. Let's do the Christmas tree first, because this is again one of those. I think you mentioned before a myth of a myth, right? Or a legend of a legend. There's so many of these interesting layer upon layer of things when it comes to Christmas and the different traditions. Unpack or unwrap or I can't think of a fun metaphor or pun here for you. Okay, unwrap the Christmas tree for us a little bit, Dr. Foley, because they're really interesting. I think multi-layered tradition.
Contrary to popular belief, the Christmas tree is not a pagan Yuletide holdover. It is a quintessentially Christian invention. It is the product of medieval theater. December 24th was the unofficial feast of Adam and Eve, who, according to tradition, felt really, really bad about the fall and damning all of humanity. And so they did the rest of their 900 years in penance. And so they did die in sanctifying grace. And so December 24th was this unofficial feast of Adam and Eve, and it set the stage for the reason for the birth of the God-man. The fall of the old Adam and the old Eve presaged the need for the new Adam and the new Eve. So in the Middle Ages, they staged plays that reenacted the Garden of Eden, and they had two trees on the stage. One was the tree of life, which was decorated for candy to symbolize eternal life. The other was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which was decorated with apples or symbols of apples, red balls. When eventually these plays were discontinued, people loved them so much that they took the two trees, they combined them into one, and they moved them into their homes. And that is the origin of the Christmas tree.
That's so interesting. So there, I've heard stories of saints associated with these Christmas trees who, I don't know, popularized them, or I've heard the idea of like the pagan myth. That's oh, here's a pun. That's rootless as far as we can. Is that safe to say? Because every year somebody will post this some kind of thing about the Christmas tree and how it's a pagan thing. Nothing to that.
Nothing to it. Absolutely nothing. So the pagans did have Yule trees. They did. And they had evergreens in their homes to guard against the doldrums of winter. That's true. But the Christmas tree is an independent development. And an interesting proof of this is that in Germany, into the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries, some German households would have two trees. One was the Yule tree, and the other was the Christmas tree, which would not be put up until December 24th.
That's so fascinating. So you can see when that tradition kind of almost bridges in that case. That's awesome. So with the Christmas tree often comes Christmas lights, and on our houses we often put Christmas lights up. Now we are very slow this year to put our lights up. So our neighbors we're in a new house this year. We've just moved, and I think our neighbors think that we have enough statues that they know who we are. But I'm worried now they think there were some kind of Catholics who hate Christmas lights. But Christmas lights are not a pagan tradition, are they? I can put those up. You absolutely can. When to put them up is, up to your discretion. Should have been last week, but yeah, I tend to put our Christmas lights up during the O antiphons, or the golden nights, which are the 8 days prior to Christmas. But that's just a family thing. It's whatever you want. There is a beautiful Irish tradition of putting Christmas candles in the windows. And this is one of the origins of our Christmas lights. The Irish would do this on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. And it was a secret signal to any priest during the days of the penal code. It was a signal that this was a safe place to celebrate Mass. And when the British asked, why are you putting up these candles in your windowsill? They would say, oh, we were just providing a beacon for Jesus, Joseph, and Mary on their journey to the inn. And the British are like, oh yeah, you Irish, you're so superstitious. And so they dismissed it. But it was an awesome code. Come here to celebrate Mass. I think that's fantastic, and I feel less guilty without putting the Christmas lights up yet. I like that. I like that your tradition sounds. We'll say we're doing that. I like that. I like that. If the kids catch wind and ask, yeah, that's awesome, and I love that. So to expand that, because that obviously didn't just stay with Irish Catholics at the time. The idea of the Christmas lights have now spread far and wide. We had neighbors growing up who, 3 bachelors lived on the street who were into computers back when computers were like, ooh, computers. And they programmed their house to flash. They had like 30,000 light bulbs flashing their house to different soundtracks, right? You could drive down the street and tune your radio to a certain frequency and hear their house and watch the lights coordinate with the sounds. And it was this amazing thing until Bylaw came in and closed them down a couple of years later, I think. But how did that tradition then spread to what we have today with Christmas lights all over houses? And is that an American, like, we want to beat this thing up kind of thing? Well, we talked about the Christmas tree. We talked about the tree of life.
the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the red balls and the candy canes. But the third thing is the lights on the Christmas tree. The lights on the Christmas tree were also a German Christian thing, the Weihnachts pyramid. And there was a pyramid of candles that represented basically the Jesse tree, the earthly genealogy of Jesus Christ. So lights, Christmas candles were always a very big part of the season. So it's not that surprising that once electric lights were invented, that we would take this technology and move it outside.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Yeah. So the same symbolism, but just outside. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
So obviously this didn't happen before electricity, right? You're not going to keep a bunch of candles outside in the wind. It's not going to last long. And even if you got your little hurricane lamps or whatever, it's not going to work, right? But once electricity was invented, they took the symbolism of light and they externalized it.
Someone tried, though, I'm sure, right? I'm sure someone tried to put the candles on. Again.
They probably burned the village down.
Yeah, I'm sure. Okay, so mistletoe. I have to ask because it's the title of your book. Why do we? This seems like I can't even imagine where this came from. Kissing under mistletoe. Why?
Because it's a magical plant.
Yeah.
And that's what the Druids thought. So the Druids in England, Ireland, and some parts of northern France, they looked at this green thing that was verdant in the middle of winter, that had berries in the middle of winter, that never touched the soil, and yet was still growing. They looked at this thing as magical. And so the Druids would treat the mistletoe with special reverence. They would make peace under the mistletoe. And then when the Christians came into play, they took the mistletoe symbolism and added their signature greeting of peace, which is the holy kiss. And that is why we kiss under the mistletoe.
That's awesome. Wow. I love that idea. I love the Christianization of mistletoe with the holy kiss. That makes sense. That's biblical. I think it's even totally the Protestants can get behind that, Dr. Foley.
But what I've discovered after this book came out is that I've discovered that the mistletoe tradition only applies to those areas of the globe that have somehow been influenced by the Druids. So that means England, Ireland, America, Canada, some other parts of the Anglosphere. But I have a lot of Hispanic students here in Baylor. I'm like, mistletoe? What are you talking about? And I have a Nigerian student this year, and I said, Miss Chukwuma, do you kiss under the mistletoe? And she looked at me like I had three heads. And I said, so just to warn you, if some boy kisses you under this weird looking plant, it may not be sexual assault. It may be, but it may not be. I just want to make you aware of some cultural differences.
Oh, that is important. That's important to outline. That's kind of weird.
No Druids in Nigeria, apparently.
Yeah. That's amazing. So you have a whole section of this book that I think is fantastic. That kind of gives a peek into the origins of all kinds of different Christmas carols and Advent hymns. O Come, O Come, Emmanuel is what we're singing a lot right now during the Advent season. Can you talk a bit about the origin of this song that's become so popular as an Advent hymn leading up to Christmas?
Oh, that is the best of all the Advent hymns. It's so magnificent. So the Golden Nights are these wonderful 8 days before Christmas, where during Vespers, the Liturgy of the Hours, there is an antiphon that praises the pre-incarnate Word of God. So, and it goes through salvation history. So the first day, you praise him as wisdom. The second day, you praise him as Yahweh in the burning bush. The third day, you praise him as the key of David or the root of Jesse. You like go through in a weird way, the appearances of the Son of God in the Old Testament before he became the Son of God in the New Testament. And each of the verses of O Come, Emmanuel go back to this beautiful tradition.
That's amazing, and it that's walking you through it, kind of, I guess, hand in hand with the divine office, right? Liturgy of the Hours, towards Christmas. That's awesome. So we should be singing more of those verses. We should request more of the verses be sung than just the first verse, maybe, to get the full experience.
Quite so. Yeah. Although if you want to be strict, and I'm not being strict, maybe you shouldn't start until December 17th, which is when those antiphons begin. But hey, I'm not going to be strict.
So you cover all kinds of different Christmas hymns in here. I note no coverage of "Mary Did You Know" anywhere in here. This didn't make the cut for a popular Christmas song.
I'm really sorry. There are so many great Christmas songs. I did have to end it somewhere, but I apologize. I'll work on that for the second edition.
Do you think Mary knew though?
Mary.
Mary knew. That's awesome. There are all kinds of interesting Christmas foods that you talk about. The fruitcake, gingerbread. Do you have a favorite Christmas candy canes? Do you have I mentioned chestnuts earlier. Mine are roasting back in the open fire back there. I should check on those in a second. Do you have a favorite Christmas food or a couple of favorite Christmas foods that when you're researching this book, you're like, oh, that's an amazing, origin of this popular Christmas food that we have, that we enjoy?
I enjoyed researching all the origins of these different Christmas foods, but I'll be honest, my personal favorite, my mother's side of the family is French Canadian. And so I enjoy, after midnight mass, tourtière, which is a pork pie. And I normally do not like meat pies, but there's something special about tourtière with chow chow, which is sort of a green French Canadian ketchup that, I don't know, it just hits the spot after midnight mass.
I was in France once, Dr. Foley, and I have a bit of French. I grew up in Canada, so I took French all the way through high school and into university. And I mixed up the French name for tortilla, like a tart, with tartare one time, and received some raw meat on my plate, very, very delicately presented with a raw egg on top, I should add, and had to eat it because I paid $60 for it, so I had to finish it. That was fun. That was a fun trip. Things like the fruitcake, the candy cane. Where do these things come from? Is a fruitcake kind of like, let's just put all the fruit into a that we have going rotten in the fridge and soak this thing in the alcohol we can't drink because it's we're heading into, I don't know, where does this? I feel like during Lent someone's making this cake and then saving it for the next year. All the alcohol they need, they just use it all up and then put it in the cold cellar and bring it out again. And here's my Christmas gift this year. Where does something like that come from?
The first reference to a fruitcake is from the writings of King Solomon, and those original fruitcakes could still be around, being circulated somewhere from family to family.
I think so.
It's a mixed blessing. Let's just put it that way. I think the fruitcake became associated with the Christmas holidays because in the old days, what were your other options, right? The only way to preserve sweets was by putting it in something like a fruitcake. You didn't have modern access to sugar or preservatives. And so your only option for a sweet was a fruitcake. Now, of course, we have other options, and the fruitcake is often the butt of a joke.
And the candy cane, there are again myths upon myths of the candy cane's origin. Is there any truth to this being the bishop's crook, the shepherd's crook, like the an upside down J for Jesus. I've heard all these stories over the years, and often you'll see them posted on Facebook, and then somebody comes along with the article they post afterwards to debunk the first article, and then a third debunker comes along. The candy cane, is this a Christian origin?
It definitely originates in Christian culture. Evangelicals often portray it as a symbol of Jesus because it's the shepherd's crook, it's the letter J, the red is his blood, the white is his innocence. The earliest reference we have to a peppermint candy of that sort was actually a German choir master. On Christmas Eve, he had this choir full of kids who were very restless, and so he concocted this candy for them to suck on so they could shut up during the parts that they weren't supposed to sing.
That's fantastic. That's a better origin story than I could have imagined. Yeah, that's great. So what you're saying is in the weeks leading up to Christmas, I should just be bringing candy canes to work, and that'd be a great way of...
Anytime one of your coworkers starts prattling, just stick a candy cane in their mouth.
That's fantastic. And often they'll be fine with that. I mean, like, that's, thank you. That's the proper response to that. Oh, I love that. That's awesome. There's lots to cover here. I'm wondering about the fact that for us, for the Catholics celebrating Christmas, it does not end on Christmas Day, right? That's just, traditionally, I shouldn't say the beginning of the end. That's the beginning of the Christmas season. And there's lots besides Christmas to keep on celebrating. So what does that season look like traditionally for the Catholic celebrating Christmas?
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know what it's like where you are, but, in here, even in Central Texas, this year I saw Christmas trees and jack-o'-lanterns being sold at the same time in the store. The Christmas season, the marketing season, starts earlier and earlier each year. And one of the unfortunate effects of that is that by the time December 25th comes around, you're sick of Christmas. Like you've had it, right? So our ancestor did have a better idea. They observed restraint during the season of Advent. It was still a time of joy, of great anticipation, but there was also restraint. And then when Christmas Day came, you pulled out all the stops and you celebrated, as you mentioned, the 12 days of Christmas as a period of unbroken merriment. And you did that between December 25th and January 6th, the Feast of the Epiphany. That to me is a healthier model. Christmas should not end on Christmas. It's just the beginning of the merriment.
I had a guest on last week talking about Advent, and he said that his family, a Polish Catholic family, growing up with a large family, used to put the tree up, put lights out, but not turn anything on or do anything until after Christmas Eve Mass. They'd come home, and he said the kids were so worked up, they were so at a frenzy, just waiting for the tree to go on, that they'd turn it on, they'd go nuts, he said, open the gifts, and just eat the food of the entire house, be wait till 3 a.m. and then pass out till Christmas afternoon the next day. As a family, this wild, like the energy just pent up, they just go crazy. He said, and he loved it as a kid growing up. He said he couldn't sustain that as an adult with his own kids. He said it was impossible, but he respected his parents for the effort they put into it. I think the awesome thing, I mean, I'm a convert. We're a family of converts, my wife and I, to the Catholic faith. And a lot of the listeners to this show are in that place, looking at the Catholic Church or thinking about it, or new converts. And you're suddenly, when you become Catholic, open up to this whole new world of, okay, so here I'm at Mass on leading up to Christmas, and I see trees, but they're dark, and I often see garlands set up and wreaths set up, but it's all kind of, it's there, but suddenly you come on Christmas Eve or Christmas morning or the days following, and the church just looks incredible. The lights are all on. It's just this amazing Christmas feast for the eyes. The priests are in white vestments, and it's very much this celebration, and it keeps going on and on and on and on and on. And it really is this access to a whole new season to celebrate, right? If you can wait long enough not to get sick of it, like you said, it's access to a whole new, there's all kinds of traditions that come after the 25th, right? That a Catholic can really dig into and celebrate to keep the season, properly speaking, going, right?
You're absolutely right. And there are fun customs for almost every one of the 12 days of Christmas. A lot of them are topsy-turvy. They involve an inversion of a social hierarchy. On the Feast of the Holy Innocents, parents and children switch places. On Boxing Day, enlisted servicemen and officers would change places. There are all kinds of fun ways of, in a sense, celebrating the ultimate inversion in human history, which is God becoming a little baby.
That's so interesting and fun, and lots to engage in there. And my guest last week cautioned the idea that don't take on too much, say for Advent, as a family with young kids trying to do Advent right. What's your advice for somebody, maybe that new convert, that person just become Catholic, that with young kids looking to adopt some Catholic Christmas traditions? Maybe in closing, what's your advice to a family like that, a person like that, trying to just kind of begin their Catholic journey with young kids, young family, but make it a meaningful, faith-based season? What would your advice be to somebody like that as we think about celebrating Christmas?
Very simple. Go slowly and go organically. We have 6 kids, my wife and I. We were incorporating a lot of these traditions, which were not in our own personal histories. But the beauty of it is, when you start out with a young family, it's relatively easy to stay one step ahead of them. But you don't have to do it all at once. It's like our first Christmas, we got a very small nativity set. It was Joseph, Mary, and Jesus. And then the next year we got one king. And then after that, a second king and a third king. And we got some shepherds and some sheep. But you build gradually, and you do that with other Christmas customs as well. And the other thing is, it's not about quantity, right? There's so many Christmas customs from around the world. If you incorporate every single one of them, you will be a flipping idiot. The point is just to incorporate the things that really bring about your authentic celebration of the birthday of the God-man.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. I'm going to try the goblin thing this year and tell the kid it was your idea, or tell the wife it was your idea if she asks. Yeah.
No, I really do like Christmas goblins, but that's just kind of a personal thing.
I think that's fantastic. Dr. Foley, this has been a real treat to talk to you. A good time. My egg dunk is done now, so we're done talking. I got to go fill this up again. Enjoyable. Where do you want to point listeners towards? There's all kinds of awesome things, this book, amongst other things. Is there a one-stop shop where they can go to find these things, or where do you want to point them towards to find more information?
My wife and I have a Drinking with the Saints podcast where we talk about a lot of these customs every Thursday. drinkingwiththesaints.com is a website that you can consult. We also have Drinking with the Saints on Facebook. And we're leading a pilgrimage cruise, riverboat cruise in April 2023 with Father Leo Patalinghug, who's the master chef for EWTN. And that's going through the Douro region of Portugal and Spain. And we would love you and all your listeners to come join us.
I will leave the kids and come. That sounds fantastic. Dr. Foley, this has been awesome. Thanks for another good Waco guest in the books. You guys never disappoint. So thank you down there in Waco. Appreciate that. And thanks for all the awesome work you're doing for the church. This is great stuff. Keep it coming. Please don't stop. It's a lot of fun. And thanks for being here today. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Take care.